So today I'm revisiting the common toolbox that I created recently to address the differences between MQL4 and MQL5, mainly because in my videos I'm spending so much time talking about the few lines of code that have to be written differently between the two, and with these functions and classes that I'm creating, I'm isolating all of that difference so that when I write experts and indicators in the future, I can concentrate more on what goes into the expert and the logic of that programming, rather than worry about the few differences between MQL4 and 5. In the first video in this series, I created common classes to address the technical indicators that are inbuilt into MetaTrader, and specifically I wrote the moving average and the MACD indicators. So those classes now can just be used from either the MQL4 or MQL5 without the expert worrying about the different ways that those technical indicators are used. Today I'm addressing the other two major problems that I find when I'm creating these videos, and that is the ctrade class in MetaTrader 5, which doesn't exist in MQL4 and means that I have to use order send for MetaTrader 4 and ctrade for MetaTrader 5, and the cposition info class that also gives me information about current trades, which has different functions in MetaTrader 4. So I want to try to make those compatible as well. So in this next stage of creating a common toolbox, I'm going to address the trade and position info classes that are existing in MetaTrader 5. So I've opened both the classic MACD MQ4 and classic MACD MQ5, which I created in an earlier video, just to show what I'm going to be looking at here. And I've lined them up side by side. The first difference you can see in the MQ5 version, I have this hash include of trade.mqh, where I bring in the ctrade and the cposition info classes, and then they align with the include classic MACD in both. Then in the version init section for MQ5, I have to set the expert magic number for that trade object, and then I go into a number of functions that are different simply because of the differences between MQ4 and MQ5. So the trade count is different because of orders total compared to positions total, and the order functions compared to the position functions. And then the version open trade is here because the statements for opening trades are different between MQ4 with the order send and MQ5 where I'm using trade.positionOpen. So what I'm going to do is try to make these common. I'm going to start with the open trade and create a class that will match the trade class from MetaTrader 5 in MetaTrader 4. And I'm going to be creating a position open function inside that trade class. Now the reason I've decided to make this the position open function and make the MQ4 version look like MQ5, MetaTrader 5 not only introduced position, but it retained order. So I can't simply create order send because that already exists in MetaTrader 5. So what I need to do is make the MetaTrader 4 version look more like MetaTrader 5. And that way I can hide all of the differences between these order functions. And I'll only be creating as much as I need in these classes. I'm not going to try to create an all-encompassing class. I'll leave that until I need to make further changes. So first thing to do is to remove the need for this separate version open trade between the two versions, and then I'll be able to put everything inside this classic macd.mqh file. Now the first thing I will do, because I'll be creating more and more of these classes as I expand the common toolbox, I'm going to create a folder underneath Orchard where I'm going to store this common toolbox. And then these indicators classes that I created in the first part of this series, I'm just going to move all of that inside the common toolbox. And now to get started with this trade class, I'll create a folder inside here for trade. Now the trade class itself is not going to be difficult. I'm going to create a class called ctrade custom, and then that will bring in the MQ5 or the MQ4 trade class as needed. Now this is the beginning of my trade custom class. I'm in the MQ5 editor or the MQL5 editor, but I intend that this will be used by MQL5 and MQL4, so I've included this property strict for MQL4. Now that property statement will normally be picked up by the MQ4 file that we would start the compile with, but you can simply run the compiler and do a syntax check on MQH files. It doesn't always work because sometimes they need information that's coming from the MQ4 or the MQ5. But where the syntax check can run, it means that having this property strict will make the code adhere to the property strict protocols if I'm using the MQ4 editor. So the first part of this is fairly simple. If I'm compiling under MQL5, then there is an existing trade.mqh file under trade. This is the one we've already been using, and so I'm just going to bring that in. But because I'm creating this trade custom, I actually want to inherit from that. That simply creates a class that I can use everywhere called cTradeCustom, and it will inherit from ctrade and implement all of the functions of ctrade. But I want to make this compatible between 4 and 5, so for MQ4 I'll just include a statement here where I include a different file, and I'm going to be calling this file trade_mql4.mqh. It has the quotation marks instead of the angle brackets because I'm going to be storing it in the same location as this trade_custom.mqh file. So if I'm compiling under MQ4, I will not be able to get access to this trade.mqh file because that simply isn't delivered with MQ4. I will create my own with just enough functions to meet my needs currently. So now I need to create that trade_mql4 file. So just back here to the trade folder. So now I've created the trade_mql4 file. I'm calling this class ctrade, which is the same name as the trade class that is delivered with MetaTrader 5, but because I'll only ever be including either the MetaTrader 4 or the MetaTrader 5 version, it doesn't matter if the names are the same. It's not inheriting from anything, so the trade custom inherits from ctrade, not the other way around. So I'm not inheriting from anything at the moment. And I already have the constructor and the destructor defined here. If we go back and look at this MQ5 file, you'll see one of the first things I have to do is set the expert magic number. I'm creating my own class, so I could find a different way to do that, but I want to try to maintain compatibility, so I'm going to have a set expert magic number function in the trade_mql4 class. This is a very short function, so I'm just going to put it directly inside the class definition here. So set expert magic number, it's void, doesn't have any return value, const int magic, and then I simply assign this magic to the m_magic variable. And that means I need to declare this m_magic. So just an m_magic. So now that function exists in both MetaTrader 4 and 5. Now for the experts I've written so far and the experts that I'm about to be writing, the only function I need in addition to this is the position open function. So I've just copied this declaration directly from MetaTrader 5. Let me close the navigator to give it a little bit more space. It's a Boolean type, which returns the success or failure of the position open method. The arguments are a const string symbol, an order type with the enum order type, double of the volume, which is the number of lots being traded, a double value for the price, a stop loss, double take profit, and the trade comment, which defaults to empty string. And now I'll just create all of those functions. So first the constructor, and I have nothing to do here, so this will be empty. And then the destructor, and again, nothing to do in here. And now position open. And I've copied this largely from the MQ5, but cut out large chunks of code that are not necessary in the MT4 version. So first clean, and this clears structures, simply because in the MT5 version it maintains the results of these calls in a structure, which doesn't exist in MetaTrader 4, so I'm going to be creating that structure as well, and this clear structure simply resets that to blank or 0. And now in MetaTrader 5, positions are actual traded positions and orders are pending orders like buy stop, buy limit, and sell stop and sell limit. So I want to make sure that the position open function is only being called with buy and sell. So I'm just doing a test on the order types here. And if they failed, then mresult.retcode. Now m_result is a structure that we'll define in a minute, and that's the structure that gets cleared by the clear structures. So if you call this function with something other than a type buy or a type sell, it will set that return code to an invalid and then return false, which will mean that the position open failed. And then the only thing remaining in here is to call the order send function, which is the MetaTrader 4 function, using the symbol, the order type, volume, price, slippage of 0 because this function has no slippage setting for it, and I typically use 0 anyway, so I'm not going to be worrying about that until it becomes a problem for me. So as I said, I'm only writing as much code as I need to get to the next stage. Then the stop loss, the take profit, the order comment, and the magic number that's been stored earlier. And that's all of the position open method for the MQL4 version. Now this clear structures, that is a function that we need to write internally, so I'll just create that now. And it only has one statement in it, that's zero memory of the m_result. In the MQ5 version, there are additional structures that are used, but I only use the m_result so far, so that's the only one I've defined, and that's the only one that will be here. If in future I find that I need more structures, I'll just add more statements here in the clear structures function. Now, there are some additional things we need to create. This trade retcode invalid is defined in MetaTrader 5, but not in MetaTrader 4, so I need to create an enum for that. And I also need to create the structure that will hold this m_result and then declare that variable. So starting with the return code. And at the moment I'm only using one return code, so that's the only one I'll declare. And I've taken this value directly from the MT5 values, just in case I happen to write something that needs that value. And now the MQL trade result structure. Now this structure doesn't exist naturally in MetaTrader 4, but it's already declared in MetaTrader 5. So for MetaTrader 4 I have to create it, and I've simply copied the definition from MetaTrader 5. So these have been copied directly from the MetaTrader 5 help, return code, deal number, order number, volume, price, bid, ask, comment, request ID, and retcode external. Most of these I'm not using. In fact, you would have seen the only thing I am using is the return code. But I've defined everything to make it compatible, and it's just easier to define them all now and do a single copy and paste from the MetaTrader 5 version. And now I actually need that m_result. I need to declare that variable. Go to put that in the protect section here. And then the function below, the clear structures, also needs to be declared. And that takes no arguments, just void clear structures. So that's the trade_MQL4 done. Now back in the classic MacD5, that means that I no longer want to include trade/trade.mqh because I want this to be compatible between the two. At the moment it's not where I want it to be, but I'm going to replace this because I want to be able to make the same call from MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5. And I've placed this in Orchard Common Toolbox Trade Custom. So we'll bring that file in, which in the case of MetaTrader 5 will then bring in the trade.mqh file from MetaTrader 5. So let me now just compile that to make sure it's working so far. All right, and all those changes are compatible. But so far, all I've done is duplicate the trade class. I haven't made any changes in the MQ4 version. So the next step will be to modify this classic MACD file so that I no longer need this version open trade, and I can just include this trade.position open. So I'll copy that line. Open the classic MACD, and I made the call to that version open here. Let me just replace that. Instead of return, I can make that if not trade.position open. So where previously I had a call out to a version specific function for opening the position, now I can just call trade.position open, which is what I already had here in MQ5. And I'll be able to replace this function from MetaTrader 4 or remove it because it won't be called. So first in MetaTrader 5, I'll just delete this and compile again. All right, so that's working, but we'll have to switch across to the MetaTrader 4 editor to test the changes in the MQ4 version. So now this is the MQ4 editor open. I've got the MQ4 version here. I'm just going to copy that include line from MQ5. So I'm including the same file, and I'm again declaring a C trade that I'm calling trade. I can remove this function because in the MQH file I already have the call directly to trade.position open. So let's see if the MQ4 version compiles. And that does. So that's another area of difference that I've removed. So that's compatible so far. There's one more thing I need to do though. This version in it had nothing in there for MetaTrader 4, and in MetaTrader 5 it has this trade.setExpertMagicNumber, and now because I'm using the trade object in both versions, I need to put that into common code. So I'm just going to take that and remove the version init call from the common file. Again, I'll check the MQ4, it still compiles. I can remove this version init function now, and I can also remove that from the MQ5. So we're coming closer to having just common code. The only thing remaining is this trade count method, which is different because in MetaTrader 4 we have orders, and in MetaTrader 5 we have positions. And the way I can do that is by using a position info class. And I'm going to make a position info class in a similar way that I made the ctrade class common between MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5, but there are some complications here that we'll see as we create that class. So now I've changed back to the MQL5 editor, and I have this ctrade class which is already delivered with MQL5, and now through the trade custom I can also use the ctrade class in MQL4, at least for as much as I need at the moment. But I still have this include statement, the ctrade definition, and this trade count duplicated, although slightly differently, in the MQL5 and the MQL4 versions. What I'm trying to do is get to a point where all of that difference between MQL4 and MQL5 is hidden inside the libraries. So what I need to do now is create a position info class or a position info custom. In MQL5, this trade.mqh is delivered with MetaTrader, and there is also this position info.mqh, and the trade.mqh includes the position info.mqh. So that's how I'm able to get both of these just with a single include statement. So just to copy that structure, in my common toolbox for Orchard, I have the trade folder here where I've included the trade custom and the trade MQL4. I'm going to put my position info custom in that same folder. So this is the beginning of my position info custom.mqh file. I'm going to define my cPositionInfo custom class as inheriting public from cPositionInfo. And then I'm going to create this one count function in PositionInfo custom. And that count function will take the place of this trade count function. So it will actually be different between MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5. But all of that's going to be hidden inside this PositionInfo custom class, so you won't see it when you're writing expert advisors. And that's all I need in the cPositionInfo custom. I still have to write the count function, but that's all that needs to exist here because I don't have any arguments in the constructor, so I can simply ignore the default constructor and it will call the constructor for cPositionInfo, which also takes no arguments. But before I can go much further, because I've inherited from cPositionInfo, I need to make sure that in the compiler's view that exists before I get to this line. Now, cPositionInfo doesn't exist in MQL4, only in MQL5, so I just need to create one. And so I'm using the if-def statement MQL4, and all I'm doing is class cPositionInfo and open and close brackets. And that defines the class. I don't have anything I need that class to do, so I don't really need anything more there. If that changes in the future, I can redefine this class. But for now, that is all I need in order to allow cPositionInfo custom to inherit from cPositionInfo. And then for the MQL5 version, I just need to make sure that I've included this position info file from the trade folder that's already delivered with MetaTrader 5. And so now I have a cPositionInfo defined from both MetaTrader 4 with this class statement and defined inside the positioninfo.mqh file for MQL5. So this line will work. The compiler won't complain about this inheritance from cPositionInfo. And now I need to write the code for this count function. I could use the if-def statements in here, but I'm going to prefer to create two separate files, one for MQL4 and one for MQL5, and then I'll just have the same function duplicated in both. And I'll use those two separate files using the if-def statements. So I haven't really saved on if-def statements, but it keeps the code cleaner, and it means that as I look at each of the MQL4 or MQL5 files, I'm only looking at code that's relevant to them. And so I'm going to include a position info custom MQL4 or a position info custom MQL5 file, depending whether I'm compiling for MQL4 or MQL5. And both of these, I've used the quotation marks rather than the angle brackets, so I'm putting them both in the same location as this position info custom.mqh file. Let me just refresh this, because when you create a new file by default, it doesn't show up here in the navigator, but there's my position info custom. So now I'm going to create the position info custom MQL5 and then the MQL4 file. So this is the beginning of my position info custom underscore MQL5 include file, and all I need to write here is the count function. If I go back here, I've already defined the count. I don't need to redefine the class. All I need to do is write the body of this count function. So this count function is going to take two arguments, the symbol and the magic, and it's going to return the number of trades that are open for that symbol and magic number. Firstly, I initialize the result to 0, and then I use positions total to tell me how many total positions I have in this portfolio. And now I'm just going to loop through those positions for I equals count minus 1, as long as I is greater than or equal to 0, and I minus minus, so I'm counting down. Now I use position get ticket as a way of selecting the ticket at that position number. And there's just one argument to that, that's the index, so index I. And position get ticket returns the ticket number for that position and also selects the information for that position into memory. If it's unsuccessful, then it will return a ticket number that is less than or equal to 0. So I'm saying here, if position get ticket returns a ticket number less than or equal to 0, then continue because it was unsuccessful in that select. If it is successful, then all of the information for that ticket will be loaded into memory. And so now I just want to make sure that that selected position has the correct symbol and magic number. Because I've inherited from the cPositionInfo class, I'm able to use the methods of that class, but symbol is also a standard method. So in order to make sure I'm getting the symbol method from cPositionInfo, I simply write cPositionInfo : symbol, and that will call the symbol method in the cPositionInfo class rather than the standard symbol method, which would just give me the symbol for the current chart. So I'm saying if the selected position symbol is equal to the symbol that's passed into this function, and then also for the magic number, there's a method on the cPositionInfo class called magic, and I can force that to be called by using this cPositionInfo : magic. So if that's equal to the magic number passed in, then just result ++. So all I'm doing is counting positions where the symbol matches the passed in symbol and magic number. And then I just return the result from that. So this is a very simple function, and it will replace that trade count function. So now I can do the same thing with the _MQL4 version. And now I've created the position info custom _MQL4 file. And I'm creating exactly the same function here, cPositionInfo custom : count, and passing in the string and magic number. I'm initializing the result. And in this case, because it's MetaTrader 4, I'm using orders total to get the count. I have the same loop for I equals count minus 1, as long as I is greater than or equal to 0, I minus minus, so still counting down. And now because it's MetaTrader 4, I'm using order select. Order select returns a Boolean if it's successful or not. So rather than check for that result being less than or equal to 0, I'm simply putting a not. So if not, order select. And the arguments to that are the position number. I'm indicating I'm selecting by position because order select can also select by ticket number. And I'm saying that I want to select from trades rather than history with mode _trades. So if that's unsuccessful, I continue, just like I did for the MetaTrader 5 version. And now MetaTrader 5 positions only hold open trades. In MetaTrader 4, these orders total will also include stop and limit orders, but I only want actual trades. So I have a test here. If the order type is not equal to buy and the order type is not equal to order type sell, then I continue. So I'm not going to be counting anything that is not a buy or a sell. So now the same test for symbol and magic number, but in this case for MetaTrader 4, I use order symbol, bracket, bracket, that's the function that gives me the currently selected symbol, and order magic number, bracket, bracket, is the function that gives me the currently selected magic number. So if the order symbol is equal to the symbol passed into the function, and the order magic number is equal to the magic number passed into the function, then I just increment result with ++. And at the end of that, I just return the result. And so now I have this count function defined in both MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5. It behaves differently, and only one of those will be included depending what I'm compiling, because I have this ifdef MQL4 or MQL5. I only need this one declaration because the arguments to it are the same. Symbol and magic number, a string and a long. So the class definition remains the same, but I just have different code for MetaTrader 4 and 5. So now I've just gone back to the trade custom.mqh file that I created already for the trade class. In MetaTrader 5, we have this include trade/trade.mqh, and that file actually includes the C position info or the position info.mqh file. I need to make sure that when I'm using this trade custom, I also include the position info custom file. So I'm just going to place one include statement in here, and that way I know that the trade custom will include the same files that the trade would have included. So the final steps are to remove this code, this include statement and the trade and position info, and this function from the MQL5 and the MQL4 versions. And then I'll put them into this classic MACD single include file. So let's start by taking this include statement . So I've copied that in. Just for completeness, I'm going to change this ctrade to ctrade custom. And because I want the additional count function, I have to change C position info to C position info custom. So now in the classic macd.mqh file, I have an include statement that will bring in trade custom. Trade custom will also pull in position info custom, and that way I can create these two variables, trade of type C trade custom and position info of type C position info custom. I've already made this change to do the trade.setExpert magic number, which is now common between MetaTrader 4 and 5, because that's included in the trade custom class. I'm going to remove the trade count, so I've still got that function here, but I'm going to remove that from Mq4 and Mq5. So in classic MACD, I won't have a trade count, but I will have a position info dot count. And remember, that takes two arguments. One of them will be the chart symbol, and the other will be the magic number. So now I can go back to my MetaTrader 5 file. I don't need those include statements now because they're included in the single include file for classic MACD. And I don't need that trade count function. I can do the same for MetaTrader 4. And so now you can see what I've achieved is that these MQ5 and MQ4 files include nothing more than the standard copyright link version properties and a single include of this one file that contains all the common code. This one file that includes all the common code has no conditional include statements. There is no hash if def MQL4 or MQL5. So now I'm able to write this expert advisor and not worry about the differences between MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5 just by including the appropriate classes. Now let me just make sure I haven't made any typing errors here. And that compiled in MetaTrader 5. And I'll just switch across to MetaTrader 4 Editor. In the MetaTrader 4 Editor now, the classic macd.mq4, I compile that, and that also compiled. So now I've made these two files, the MQ4 and the MQ5, almost identical. The only differences really are the property strict for MetaTrader 4 and of course the name being MQ5. And that way in future I can concentrate on just writing the code for the expert advisors in a single include file. And so in future I will be using these trade custom and position info custom files. I will make changes to them as needed, but I won't be just including extra code in case it's needed. I'll only do it as an indicator or expert advisor might need that code. I will leave links in future videos back to the videos in this series where I've created these so that you can find them. But to try to keep future videos short, I won't be going back over the detail of what is in these trade and position info classes. Now, Before I finish, there's just one more thing I want to do, and that's correcting a problem that I left in the last video. I've closed up all of the new classes I've created, and I've reopened the indicator base, indicator MA, and indicator MACD that I've used before, and I use those with this classic MACD. So you can see here, I have the include statement, orchard, common toolbox, indicators, indicator MA. Now this common toolbox is the new folder that I've moved all of these to since last time. They were previously just under orchard indicators, but that's just a change to the include statement, so that's not too important. What is important is that previously I've been using this C indicator MA, declaring a variable called MA, passing in all of the arguments, symbol, period, MA method, and MA applied price, and the same for the MACD. Now there's nothing actually wrong with that approach, except that if you later, after the expert advisor is running, come back into the inputs and change any of those inputs, then these statements are not executed again. So the MA and the MACD won't pick up the changes to the inputs after you've started the expert advisor. And the way to solve that is to simply not call this constructor here, just declare the variable and then call an initialization method here in the onInit. So just quickly to show what I'm going to do, here in the indicator MA, I have the constructor that takes all of the arguments. So first I'm going to create a new default constructor. Takes no arguments and calls the base constructor. Next I'm going to create an init method so that this can be called after the constructor is called. And the init method, if we scroll across, you can see it has the same arguments as the constructor: symbol, time frame, period, method, and applied price. I'll be doing the same thing for the MACD in a moment. Now that means that all of this code that's in the constructor, I actually want to move this into the init method. Easy way to do that, I'll just copy this line, duplicate that. It's a void type, C indicator MA, and I'm just changing the name here to init. So this is my init method. I just need to add the opening bracket there because it's not in the line that I copied. Now with this constructor, I don't want to duplicate all of this code, so the constructor itself can just call the init method. So all the same code's being executed. If you call the constructor the way I have been calling it previously, it will still work. It will call the indicator base constructor, then call the init method and initialize all of the values. But what this does allow me to do now is to call the init separately from the constructor. And it also allows me, because I have a default constructor, to declare these variables without having to pass the arguments in. So if I go back to my classic MACD, what I can do here now is simply declare C indicator MA semicolon. Now, this will create a variable of type C indicator MA, but it has no values. So using this will be a problem, but I can then call the init method here in the onInit. So here, all the same arguments that I had previously, but I'm calling them with the init method. And this will be executed every time you change the inputs to a running expert advisor, where this statement would not be executed. So I'll do the same now for the MACD and make them consistent. First I add the default constructor. Then I create the init method. I copy this line. Change the function name to init. Opening bracket. And then I make a call to the init method from the constructor. Now if you want to, you don't need to have a constructor that takes any arguments. You can just leave the default constructor, but know that in your code you will always have to call the init method at some point then. And then back here in the classic macd.mqh, I do the same for the macd that I did for MA. Remove all of the arguments where I'm declaring the variable. And then I call the init method using all of those same arguments: the symbol, the period, MACD fast and slow periods, MACD signal period, and the MACD applied price. So when I wrote the classic MACD in the last video, I missed the use case where people can modify these inputs after the expert is running, and this fixes that problem. So you can call the constructor here if you wish, but anytime the inputs are changed, you will need to again call the init. So really there is no benefit in calling the constructor here, because you should insert the init statement here anyway. If you want the code for these trade custom and position info custom classes, then check out our Discord channel, and if you subscribe, you'll be able to download the code that we produce in each of these videos. Next week, I will actually be using these classes. I have another expert advisor. This is another scalping expert advisor on the 5-minute charts. So if you found this useful, please click the like button. If you want to see more of these videos, including next week's video where I create that scalping expert advisor, then click subscribe, and if you click the bell icon, you can also be notified when we release those new videos. Until next time, thank you for watching.